The elevator doors opened on the 32nd floor just as I heard my wife cry out from behind her boss's locked office door. And there are certain sounds a husband recognizes even when every part of him is begging to be wrong. I stood there holding a white paper bag from the Italian place on Wabash Avenue where Lauren and I had celebrated our last 3 anniversaries, with 2 containers of truffle ravioli growing cold inside, while her voice slipped through the narrow gap beneath the door again, followed by a man's low laugh. It was 8:17 on a Thursday night in downtown Chicago. Lauren had texted me less than 20 minutes earlier saying she was alone, exhausted, and trapped at work finishing an emergency compensation report. I had decided to surprise her with dinner because that was the kind of husband I still believed I was. My name is Ethan Cole. I was 41 years old, and I owned a small construction company that renovated restaurants, offices, and apartment buildings across the city. Lauren was 38 and worked as the senior payroll administrator for Halcyon Workforce Solutions, a company that managed payroll and employee benefits for dozens of local businesses. We had been married for 11 years. Until that moment, I thought the hardest thing we had survived together was the year my company nearly collapsed after 2 commercial clients declared bankruptcy. I was wrong. The hallway was empty except for a cleaning cart parked beside the elevators, and a glass conference room glowing blue from the Chicago skyline outside. I walked toward the office slowly, noticing Lauren's cream-colored blouse draped over the back of a visitor's chair through the glass wall beside the door. Her black heels were on the carpet. One was upright. The other lay on its side beneath the desk. I didn't need to open that door. I didn't need a photograph or a confession or some detective explaining what those sounds meant. But the body has a cruel need to confirm what the mind already knows. I reached for the handle and found it locked. Then I heard Lauren whisper, "Graham, someone could still be here." He answered, "Everyone left an hour ago. Your husband thinks you're doing payroll." I want you to imagine hearing your own existence reduced to a convenient excuse in another man's sentence. Not your name. Not your marriage. Just the gullible husband at home who made the lie possible. My fingers went numb around the paper bag. My pulse wasn't merely racing. It was punching so hard behind my eyes that the hallway lights seemed to flicker with it. My stomach tightened, and for one ugly second I thought I was going to vomit directly onto the polished gray carpet. Then Graham laughed again, and something inside me went very still. 3 weeks earlier, Lauren had begun coming home after 10 at night, always carrying the same silver laptop bag and the same explanation about a payroll system migration. She stopped eating dinner with me. She started showering the instant she came through the door, and she became strangely irritated whenever I asked whether the company was compensating her for the extra hours. "Not everything is about money, Ethan," she snapped one night while removing a pair of earrings I had never seen before. That answer had stayed with me because Lauren had spent her entire career insisting that labor should always be paid correctly. A few days later, I found a receipt from the Langham Hotel inside our car. 2 cocktails, room service, and valet parking totaled $286. She claimed she had attended a client meeting there and accidentally kept the receipt after someone else paid. I wanted to believe her, so I did what people in love often do when the truth first knocks. I turned up the television and pretended I hadn't heard it. Mike Alvarez changed that. He was one of Lauren's colleagues, a payroll compliance analyst in his mid-30s, and I knew him from company Christmas parties. Earlier that afternoon, he had called me from an unfamiliar number and said, "Ethan, I can't explain this over the phone, but if Lauren tells you she's working late tonight, you should bring her dinner. Come after 8. When I demanded to know what he meant, he only said, "I'm sorry. I've already said too much." That was why I was standing outside Graham Keller's office instead of sitting at home blaming myself for becoming suspicious. Graham was Halcyon's 49-year-old regional director, a married man who wore custom suits, drove a black Range Rover, and liked to clap employees on the shoulder as if he personally owned their loyalty. I had shaken his hand at a charity dinner 4 months earlier. He told Lauren she was the smartest person on his floor, then looked me over and asked whether construction was still profitable with labor costs rising. Now he was behind that door with my wife. My first instinct was to kick it open. I had steel-toed work boots on, and the cheap commercial latch would not have survived a second strike. I pictured dragging Graham away from her. I pictured shouting until security came. I pictured Lauren's face when she saw me. Every version ended with me in handcuffs, while the two people who betrayed me became victims of my reaction. So I made a different choice. I placed the dinner bag quietly beside her shoes, took out my phone, and started recording. For 47 seconds, I captured their voices through the door. Lauren said they needed to leave separately. Graham told her his wife was in Milwaukee until Saturday. Then Lauren laughed and said, "Ethan wouldn't question me if I stayed here until midnight." That laugh hurt more than the rest. It was light, almost affectionate, the sound of someone enjoying how completely she believed she had fooled me. I photographed her blouse, the shoes, Graham's nameplate, and the time displayed on the digital conference room panel. Then I stepped backward and nearly collided with a woman standing at the corner of the hallway. Clara Benson, Halcyon's Director of Employee Relations, pressed one finger to her lips. She looked about 45, with short auburn hair and a navy coat folded over one arm. Mike stood behind her, pale and rigid. Clara motioned toward the stairwell, and I followed them because I no longer trusted myself to remain near that door. We descended one floor before Clara pushed through the fire door into a deserted break area. "Did you see them?" Mike asked. I looked at him, and he must have found the answer on my face because he lowered his eyes and whispered, "God, I'm sorry." Clara didn't waste time trying to comfort me. She asked, "Did you record anything?" I showed her the clip. Her expression changed when she heard Graham say that everyone had left. "Keep the original file," she said. "Back it up somewhere Lauren cannot access. Don't email it through a shared account." I asked how long they had known. Mike said he first suspected the affair about 5 months earlier after seeing Lauren leave Graham's hotel room during a conference in Milwaukee. Clara learned for certain 2 weeks ago when a building access report showed Lauren entering Graham's office repeatedly after hours, but she had not confronted them because Graham controlled the internal investigations budget and Lauren controlled payroll records. "There's more happening than the affair," Clara said. "We think Graham has been manipulating employee compensation accounts, and Lauren may be helping him cover it." I stared at her. Betrayal had already filled every inch of my head, and there was no room left for another disaster. "What kind of manipulation?" I asked. Mike opened a folder on his phone and showed me screenshots of payroll adjustment reports. Over 18 months, small deductions had appeared in the checks of temporary workers, warehouse employees, and hourly contractors. Most ranged from $18 to $74, amounts just low enough that many workers assumed taxes or insurance had changed. The money was being routed through something labeled the Workforce Reconciliation Reserve. Mike had searched Halcyon's internal records and found no approved reserve with that name. "At least 260 employees were affected," he said. "Our preliminary total is around $184,000. Clara added. "Graham authorized the adjustments, but someone with Lauren's credentials processed most of them." My knees weakened, and I sat at the small round table beside a vending machine. I remembered Lauren complaining about employees who questioned tiny discrepancies in their paychecks. She called them disorganized. She once said, "Half these people don't even read their statements correctly." At the time, I thought she was venting about work. Now the sentence sounded entirely different. Let me pause here, because discovering an affair is one kind of grief. You ask yourself whether you were inattentive, unattractive, too busy, too trusting. But hearing that the person sleeping beside you might also be stealing from workers, people counting every dollar for groceries and rent, does something colder. It doesn't only destroy your marriage. It makes you wonder whether you ever knew the character of the person you married. "Why, tell me?" I asked. Clara sat across from me. "Because Graham knows Mike has been asking questions, and Lauren recommended terminating him for unauthorized access to payroll data." The meeting is scheduled for Monday. Graham also ordered me to prepare disciplinary files on 3 other employees who challenged their missing wages. If we act through Halcyon's internal process, he'll bury it. If you confront Lauren tonight, they'll delete what we haven't secured. Mike leaned forward. "We need 48 hours. After that, you can do whatever you want." I looked toward the ceiling, knowing Lauren was 1 floor above us, getting dressed and preparing to come home with another lie. Every angry part of me wanted to send the recording to her immediately. But anger is expensive when lawyers become involved, and I had spent 15 years in construction learning that the first person who swings a hammer is not always the person who brings down the wall. "What do you need from me?" I asked. Clara explained that Lauren sometimes worked remotely from the home office using a company-issued laptop. They did not want me touching it, copying corporate files, or doing anything illegal. What they needed was time and confirmation that Lauren and Graham believed no one suspected them. Clara would contact Halcyon's outside legal counsel and the board's audit committee from her personal phone. Mike would preserve the reports he was legally authorized to access as part of his compliance duties. I would speak to a divorce attorney first thing Friday morning, separate my business accounts from any shared access, secure my personal documents, and behave normally until they were ready. It was not the revenge fantasy people imagine after being betrayed. There was no dramatic punch through a window, and no speech delivered over shattered glass. It was 3 people sitting beneath fluorescent lights beside a humming soda machine, quietly dividing responsibilities, while my dinner surprise turned cold upstairs. And that was exactly why it had a chance of working. We returned to the lobby separately. I went down first, walked into the humid August night, and stood beneath the awning while traffic moved along Wacker Drive. My hands began shaking only after I reached my truck. I gripped the steering wheel and tried to breathe, but every breath stopped halfway down. I called my attorney, Daniel Price, who had handled contracts for my construction company for 6 years. When he answered, I said, "Daniel, I need a divorce lawyer, and I need one who understands business assets." His tone changed immediately. "Are you in danger?" he asked. "No," I said, "but my marriage is, and possibly my company if I make one stupid move." He gave me the private number of a family law attorney named Rebecca Shaw and told me not to empty accounts, hide assets, or confront Lauren before receiving advice. I uploaded the recording and photographs to a new encrypted folder, changed the password on my business email, and drove home. Lauren arrived at 10:46 wearing the cream blouse I had seen on Graham's chair. She smelled like the citrus hand soap from her office restroom, applied so heavily that it almost concealed his cologne. She dropped her laptop bag beside the kitchen island and sighed, as if she had just completed 12 hours of honest work. "You already ate?" she asked, seeing the clean countertop. "Yeah," I said. "I figured you'd be late." She opened the refrigerator, glanced inside, and said, "I'm exhausted. Graham kept changing the numbers at the last minute." Hearing his name spoken casually inside my house nearly broke my restraint. I watched her pour sparkling water into the glass we had bought during our honeymoon in Savannah, and I wondered how many times she had stood in that kitchen after leaving him. Then she kissed my cheek. Her lips touched my skin for less than a second, and I felt nothing except the urge to wash the spot. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Long day," I replied. She smiled with visible relief. She thought the danger had passed. That night she fell asleep beside me within minutes, while I lay staring at the ceiling and building a list in my head. Freeze the business credit line, photograph our financial records, change the alarm code at the equipment yard, speak with Rebecca, preserve every message, and tell no one. At 2:13 in the morning, Lauren's phone lit up on the nightstand. The preview showed a message from Graham. "Next time, don't leave your husband's dinner outside my door." My blood went cold. Lauren had found the bag. Graham knew I had been there. And neither of them had said a word to me. I kept my eyes almost closed and watched Lauren reach for the phone. She read Graham's message, went completely motionless, then turned her head toward me. I slowed my breathing and let one arm hang loosely over the blanket. For nearly a minute, she studied my face in the blue light from the screen, trying to decide whether I was asleep, whether I had seen them, whether the paper bag had been a warning or simply the abandoned gesture of a husband who had not, heard nothing, and gone home. Then she typed something, deleted it, and typed again. Graham's response appeared a few seconds later. "Do not admit anything. I'll check the cameras tomorrow." Lauren carried the phone into the bathroom and locked the door. I heard the faucet running, not because she needed water, but because she wanted to conceal a call. I couldn't make out every word, though I caught pieces through the wall. "He's acting normal." Then, "No, he didn't ask me." And finally, "Delete tonight's access record before Mike sees it." I lay there with my heart hammering against the mattress, but this time the pain was mixed with something useful. They were frightened. Frightened people rushed, and rushed people made mistakes. Lauren returned 6 minutes later and slipped beneath the blanket without touching me. Neither of us slept. At 6:30, I got up, showered, and made coffee exactly as I did every Friday. I even filled Lauren's travel mug and added 1 packet of stevia because 11 years of routine had taught my hands what to do without consulting the rest of me. She entered the kitchen wearing charcoal trousers and a high-neck green blouse, dressed more formally than usual. "You came by the office last night?" she asked, attempting a casual tone while opening the cabinet for a plate she didn't need. "I spread cream cheese across a bagel and said, I brought dinner. Your door was locked, and nobody answered, so I figured you were in a meeting somewhere." Her eyes flickered toward me. "My door?" "The executive hallway," I corrected. "I wasn't sure which office you were using." She placed both hands on the counter. "Why didn't you call?" "I did. Straight to voicemail." That was true, and the truth made the lie around it stronger. I left the food because parking there cost me $18, and I wasn't carrying cold pasta back to the truck. Lauren produced a laugh that sounded dry and badly timed. "Graham found it. He thought one of the cleaners left it." "Did he eat it?" I asked. She stared at me, unsure whether I was joking. I smiled. "Would be ashamed to waste $36 ravioli." Her shoulders lowered slightly. She believed I hadn't opened the door because it had been locked. She believed I hadn't heard enough to know. Most importantly, she believed she had room to manage me. If you have ever had to sit across from someone who betrayed you while they measured how much of the truth you possessed, you know that conversation isn't really a conversation. It is poker played with memories, and the person who loved more usually starts with the weaker hand. That morning, I learned love could become an advantage once I stopped showing it. Lauren left at 7:12. At 7:16, Clara texted a single word from a prepaid number, "Moving." By 8, I was seated in Rebecca Shaw's office on LaSalle Street. She was 52, direct, and so calm that I trusted her before she finished reading my notes. I explained the affair, the recording, the suspected payroll theft, and the possibility that Lauren might have access to my company finances. Rebecca asked precise questions. Did we have children? No. Did Lauren own part of Cole Urban Renovation? No, but the company's value had grown during the marriage. Did she have signing authority? Only on one household account, though she knew where I kept old tax returns and insurance records. Had I obtained corporate files illegally? No. Had I touched her work laptop? No. Keep it that way, Rebecca said. The affair matters emotionally, but Illinois is a no-fault divorce state. It will not automatically hand you everything. Financial misconduct, dissipation of marital assets, or criminal exposure may matter, but we document before we accuse. She arranged for a forensic accountant named Priya to review my personal and business finances. Then we filed preliminary paperwork and prepared an emergency request preventing either spouse from transferring or destroying substantial marital assets once Lauren was formally served. Rebecca told me to remove Lauren's access to business systems if she had any, but not to drain shared accounts or conceal money. By 10:30, I had changed the credentials for my company's accounting software, instructed my bookkeeper to require verbal confirmation for transfers above $2,500, and moved original contracts from the home office safe to my attorney's document storage. I did not take a dollar that wasn't mine. I simply closed every door Lauren might try to walk through. At noon, Mike called. His voice was tight. Graham ordered IT to correct last night's access logs. He says the system duplicated entries. Can he do that? I asked. Not without leaving an audit trail. That's the problem for him. He thinks deleting something makes it disappear, but the building vendor keeps an independent server. Clara had already contacted the vendor under her authority as Employee Relations Director and requested a preservation hold. She had also spoken with Halcyon's outside counsel, who immediately escalated the matter to the chair of the audit committee. By then, the suspected theft had grown. Mike found that the Workforce Reconciliation Reserve was linked to a consulting company registered in Indiana called North Meridian Advisory. Its mailing address was a private box in Hammond, and its owner was listed as Graham's brother-in-law. Over 19 months, Halcyon had sent North Meridian $327,400 in payments categorized as payroll corrections and compliance consulting. Some of the money came from employee deductions. The rest appeared to come from benefit refunds that should have been returned to workers after insurance adjustments. Where does Lauren fit? I asked. Mike hesitated. Her credentials approved 43 transfers totaling a little over $211,000. I leaned back in my truck and closed my eyes. Could Graham have used her login? Possibly. But she signed 2 verification forms electronically, and one was processed from your home internet connection. That detail landed differently. The affair was no longer something Lauren could blame on loneliness or manipulation. She had brought whatever this was into our home, sat in the room where I prepared estimates and paid subcontractors, and possibly helped a wealthy executive steal from hourly workers. Don't decide what she knew until the investigators establish it, Mike said. I'm telling you what the records show, not what a court will conclude. I appreciated that. Mike was angry, but he remained careful. That was why his evidence had weight. Around 3, Lauren called and asked whether I wanted to meet her for dinner. Her voice had an artificial brightness that told me she and Graham had decided to test my story. I agreed and suggested a steakhouse near the river where we had gone after I won my first 6-figure renovation contract. When I arrived, she was already seated in a corner booth with a glass of white wine. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. We haven't had enough time together lately, she said. That's partly my fault. I looked at her wedding ring and thought about Graham's office. "Work has been rough," I said. "I understand." "Do you?" she asked quickly. "Of course." She drank before continuing. "Sometimes I worry you think I'm choosing the job over us." It was almost impressive. She was constructing the smaller confession she hoped would conceal the larger one. She would admit to being distant, apologize for working late, perhaps cry about pressure, and invite me to feel guilty for suspecting her. "I know you're doing what you think is best for our future," I said. That answer pleased her. She began talking about taking a vacation to Napa in October, and I nodded, while silently calculating whether our marriage would still legally exist by then. Halfway through dinner, Graham walked into the restaurant. He pretended to notice us only after speaking to the hostess, then approached with a broad, polished smile. "Lauren, Ethan, what a coincidence!" It wasn't a coincidence. Lauren's surprise was half a second too late. Graham wanted to see me in person. He wanted to judge whether I knew. I stood and shook his hand. His grip was firm, but the skin between his thumb and forefinger was damp. "Thanks for finding the pasta," I said. His smile tightened. "Pasta? Outside your office. Lauren said you found it." "Right. Of course. Very thoughtful of you. Did you eat it?" I asked. Lauren stared at her plate. Graham gave a strained chuckle and said he had already ordered dinner. I told him he had missed out because the ravioli was excellent when warm. Then I held his gaze for one silent beat longer than politeness required. He excused himself and walked toward the bar, where a man in a gray jacket was waiting. Lauren watched him go, then turned to me. "That was weird." "What was?" "The way you talked to him." I cut another piece of steak. "I was annoyed he wasted my food." Her laugh came too loudly, and two people in the next booth glanced over. "Now, sit with that scene for a moment." I was sharing dinner with my wife, while her lover stood 20 feet away, and all three of us were pretending the most important fact in the room did not exist. The difference was that Lauren and Graham thought the performance protected them. I knew it was only keeping them calm while other people secured the exits. At 9:20 that evening, Clara met with two members of Halcyon's audit committee, outside counsel, and a forensic investigator in a private conference room at a hotel near O'Hare. Mike joined remotely and provided the transaction map. I remained at home with Lauren, watching a renovation show she had chosen while she exchanged messages with Graham beneath a throw blanket. Around 11, Clara sent me an update. Evidence accepted. Independent investigation authorized. Do not engage. Saturday passed under the strangest silence of my life. Lauren suggested we visit the farmer's market in Lincoln Park, and I went because Rebecca had advised me not to reveal the filing until formal service was ready. She bought peaches, fresh bread, and yellow flowers for the kitchen. She linked her arm through mine while we walked between vendors, performing affection with such confidence that I briefly wondered whether she had divided herself into two separate people. One woman loved choosing peaches with her husband. The other left her clothes in her boss's office and approved suspicious transfers from their home. Both wore the same face. On Sunday afternoon, Priya called with the first result of her financial review. Lauren had opened an individual account at a bank I did not use. Over 14 months, she deposited $68,500 into it through transfers labeled performance bonuses. Halcyon's payroll records showed no bonuses matching those amounts. She had spent nearly $19,000 from the account on hotels, designer clothing, restaurants, and payments toward a Range Rover lease registered to Graham. Rebecca immediately added the records to our petition as potential dissipation and concealed marital funds. "There's something else," Priya said. 3 weeks ago, Lauren transferred $40,000 from that account into a brokerage account. Yesterday morning, she tried to move the entire balance to an institution in the Cayman Islands. Tried? I repeated. The bank's fraud system delayed it because the destination was new. The transfer is pending. Rebecca acted within the hour. By Sunday evening, a judge approved a narrowly tailored emergency preservation order covering the disputed funds. Lauren had no idea. She was upstairs packing her work bag for Monday. At 7:40 the next morning, she kissed me goodbye and said she might be late because Mike's termination meeting could become messy. I looked at the woman who planned to help fire the colleague trying to protect hundreds of workers and said, I have a feeling it will. At 8:55, Mike entered Halcyon's main conference room expecting Graham and Lauren to accuse him of misconduct. Clara was already seated inside, accompanied by outside counsel, 2 board representatives, and a forensic investigator. At 9:02, Lauren arrived carrying a folder with Mike's disciplinary documents. Graham walked in behind her. According to Clara, he stopped so abruptly that Lauren nearly collided with him. Outside counsel asked them both to surrender their laptops, phones, building credentials, and access cards pending an investigation into payroll diversion and evidence destruction. Graham's face turned dark red. He demanded to know who had authorized it. One of the board members replied, We did. Lauren looked at Mike and said, What have you done? Mike answered, I read the numbers you hoped nobody would read. At 9:17, while they were still inside that room, a process server entered the reception area carrying a sealed envelope with Lauren's name on it. But before he reached her, Graham suddenly pointed across the table and shouted, Ask Lauren where the money went. She designed the deductions. She told me the workers would never notice. The entire room went silent. Then he added the sentence that changed the case from an internal scandal into something much larger. Yes, I took money from them, but I wasn't the only one. Lauren stared at Graham as if he had slapped her. You told me those deductions were legal administrative corrections, she said. Graham gave a short, ugly laugh. You created the reserve code because you ordered me to, and you accepted the bonuses. Outside counsel raised one hand and told them both to stop speaking, but panic had already broken whatever agreement they had made. Graham began talking over everyone, insisting that North Meridian had provided legitimate consulting services even while admitting that part of its revenue came from money withheld from workers. He said the deductions were supposed to be temporary, that the company had cash flow problems, and that he intended to reimburse the accounts after securing a new client contract. Clara asked why employee money had paid for his Range Rover, hotel rooms, and a $14,600 golf club membership. Graham looked at Lauren and said, She handled the personal expenses. Lauren pushed back from the table. You said those were executive benefits. You knew exactly what they were. I knew we were moving money. I didn't know you were stealing it. That distinction did not help her nearly as much as she seemed to think it would. She had just admitted participating in the transfers in front of attorneys, board members, and a forensic investigator. Let me pause here, because this was the twist none of us expected. Clara and Mike had gathered enough records to prove suspicious transactions, but they still needed to establish intent. Graham and Lauren did that for them in less than 4 minutes. The moment each decided to save themselves by sacrificing the other, they supplied the missing pieces of the case. At 9:21, outside counsel ended the meeting and instructed them not to contact employees or access company systems. Security collected their credentials. The process server stepped forward as Lauren entered the reception area and handed her the divorce petition, the financial preservation order, and noticed that the disputed brokerage funds could not be moved. Clara later told me that Lauren read the first page twice before whispering, He knew. Graham stood several feet away watching her. The realization spread across his face more slowly. the dinner bag, my calm handshake, the restaurant. Every moment he had mistaken for ignorance rearranged itself in his head. Lauren called me 7 times in 10 minutes. I did not answer until Rebecca confirmed that service had been completed. When I finally picked up, Lauren didn't say hello. She shouted, "You set me up." I was standing in the unfinished lobby of a boutique hotel my company was renovating in Fulton Market. A circular chandelier still lay packed in wooden framing behind me, and one of my foremen was measuring the reception desk 20 feet away. I walked into a vacant office and shut the door. "I brought my wife dinner," I said. "You were having sex with your boss. Everything after that came from choices you made. You don't understand what happened." Then explain the $68,000. Silence. Not shock. Not confusion. Silence. "Who told you about that?" she asked. That question was all the confirmation I needed. "My attorney will communicate with yours." "Ethan, wait. Graham manipulated me. He said the money came from unused corporate benefit accounts. I didn't know employees were losing wages. You tried to send $40,000 offshore after you found my dinner outside his office. I panicked. Innocent people don't panic by hiding money in the Cayman Islands." Her voice cracked. "Please come home so we can talk." That house is no longer a private place for this conversation. Pack clothing and personal necessities. Rebecca will arrange a time for you to collect everything else. You can't throw me out of my own home. I'm not. The court will determine possession. But if you come there to destroy records or intimidate me, I'll document it. She became quiet, and when she spoke again, her anger had vanished. "Did you hear us?" I leaned against the unfinished drywall and looked through the doorway at the men working for me, people whose paychecks I had occasionally covered from my personal savings when clients were late. "Enough," I said. "How much?" "Enough to understand who you became." Lauren started crying. She said the affair began 8 months earlier after a conference. Graham made her feel respected and powerful. He told her I was holding her back, that my construction company would always consume my attention, and that she deserved someone who understood her ambitions. Then she said the sentence unfaithful people seem to believe carries magical weight. "I never stopped loving you. You didn't protect me like someone you loved," I replied. "You used my trust as cover." She told me the financial scheme had started before the affair. Graham initially asked her to correct benefit overpayments, then gradually changed the destination accounts. By the time she understood that some deductions were coming directly from workers, she was already implicated. Instead of reporting him, she accepted money to stay quiet. The first payment was $5,000. The next was $7,500. Soon Graham called them bonuses, and Lauren used them to finance the secret life they were building together. "I thought he would fix it," she said. "No." "You hoped he would erase it before you were forced to choose between honesty and comfort." She asked whether there was any chance of saving our marriage. "There was," I said. "It existed every day before last Thursday." Then I ended the call. By noon, Halcyon placed Lauren and Graham on unpaid suspension. By Tuesday, the board hired an independent accounting firm and notified federal authorities, the Illinois Department of Labor, and every client whose employees might have been affected. The scandal became public Wednesday morning when a local business reporter obtained the suspension notices. The first headline referred only to alleged payroll irregularities. Within 48 hours, reporters had connected North Meridian to Graham's brother-in-law, found his Range Rover, and interviewed 6 workers whose pay had been reduced. One was a single father named Terrence, who lost $43 from 3 consecutive checks and paid an overdraft fee because his rent payment cleared before he noticed. Another was a nursing assistant who had questioned a $71 deduction and received an email signed by Lauren stating that the amount was a mandatory benefits reconciliation. She still had the email. The story spread across Chicago because theft becomes real when the public sees the people behind the numbers. Graham and Lauren had not taken abstract accounting units. They had taken groceries, utility payments, bus fares, and hours of other people's lives. Halcyon terminated them both after the preliminary audit. Graham's wife filed for divorce and sought an order preserving their assets. His country club suspended him. The company recovered the Range Rover within days because Halcyon funds had paid most of the lease. Lauren moved into a furnished studio in River North that cost more per month than she could afford without her salary. She sent me long emails at 2 and 3 in the morning, alternating between apologies, accusations, and explanations. I forwarded every message to Rebecca without responding. 3 weeks later, investigators interviewed Lauren under a cooperation agreement. She surrendered messages, transfer instructions, and recordings Graham had sent her. Those records showed that he had personally designed the scheme and repeatedly assured her that workers would not notice small deductions. But they also showed Lauren understood the truth at least 9 months before the investigation. In one exchange, she warned him that a group of warehouse workers had compared their checks. Graham replied, "Spread adjustments across different pay periods." Lauren answered, "I can keep each one under 80, but Mike is already looking." That message destroyed her claim that she had remained unaware. The final audit identified 418 affected employees and contractors. The stolen or diverted money, including fraudulent consulting payments, reached $612,780. Halcyon established a reimbursement fund with interest and paid the workers before the criminal case concluded. Clara supervised the notification process. Mike reviewed every calculation. He personally called Terrence to tell him he would receive $486, including reimbursement for the deductions, bank fees, and interest. Mike later told me that hearing the man become silent on the phone meant more to him than watching Graham lose his office. I understood exactly what he meant. Revenge feels powerful in imagination, but repair is what gives it purpose. My divorce moved faster than Lauren expected because the financial trail was so clear. The judge did not treat the affair as a shortcut that automatically awarded me everything, and Rebecca had warned me not to expect that. What mattered financially was Lauren's hidden account, her use of marital time and resources to support the affair, and her attempt to move disputed funds offshore. The court froze the questionable money until ownership and restitution claims could be resolved. I retained full operational control of Cole Urban Renovation. Lauren received her lawful share of ordinary marital property, but not the fantasy payout she had apparently expected from my company. More than $46,000 remaining in her concealed accounts was surrendered toward restitution and legal obligations. We sold the house, paid the mortgage, and divided the legitimate equity under the settlement. I bought a smaller brick townhouse in Bridgeport with a rooftop view of the skyline. For the first time in years, every object inside my home was there because I had chosen it. Graham eventually pleaded guilty to charges connected to wire fraud, theft, and falsifying corporate records. His cooperation reduced his sentence, but it did not preserve his freedom, career, or reputation. Lauren pleaded guilty to a lesser financial offense after providing evidence against him. She avoided a long prison sentence but received probation, community service, restitution obligations, and a conviction that made returning to payroll administration nearly impossible. Some people online claimed she had been another victim of a powerful executive. Others said she deserved the same punishment as Graham. I stopped trying to decide which public label fit her. She had been manipulated in certain ways, But she had also made conscious decisions, collected money, lied to workers, and tried to protect herself at their expense. Two truths could exist at the same time. 9 months after the scandal, Clara was appointed Halcyon's Vice President of Employee Integrity and Compliance. She redesigned the complaint process so no regional executive could suppress wage concerns again. Mike became Director of Payroll Compliance, received a substantial raise, and built an automated system that flagged unusual deductions before money left an employee's check. They remained my friends, not romantic replacements and not temporary allies discarded after the battle. Once a month, the three of us met at a small Mexican restaurant in Pilsen. We rarely discussed Lauren or Graham. We talked about Mike's terrible softball team, Clara's plan to visit Portugal, and the strange turns our careers had taken because of one locked office door. My own career changed too. The publicity had revealed that I was connected to the case, but I never gave interviews about the affair. When a reporter asked for comment, I spoke only about the workers and the importance of transparent pay records. That restraint brought my company unexpected attention. A labor organization hired Cole Urban Renovation to remodel 3 training centers because, as its director told me, "We want contractors who understand that workers aren't numbers." That contract was worth $1.8 million. I used it to hire 12 additional employees, promote my foreman Marcus to operations manager, and introduce a profit-sharing program. Within 18 months, our annual revenue had nearly doubled. Mike later helped my bookkeeper create a payroll review system so every employee could see clearly how wages, bonuses, and deductions were calculated. The experience had made me more careful, but it had not made me suspicious of everyone. That distinction mattered. Before Lauren's betrayal, I thought strength meant absorbing pressure without disturbing anyone around me. I believed being a good husband and employer meant fixing every problem quietly, paying every bill, and asking for little in return. Afterward, I understood that boundaries were not acts of cruelty. They were the structure that kept generosity from becoming permission. Lauren saw me one final time outside the courthouse after our divorce was entered. She looked thinner, older, and exhausted. She asked whether I was happy that her life had been destroyed. I considered the question before answering. "No. I'm relieved that you can't keep destroying other people's lives." She looked down at the pavement. "Graham ruined everything. Graham opened the door," I said. "You walked through it." She asked if I ever missed her. I told her I missed the person I believed she had been, but that person could no longer be separated from the evidence of what she chose to do. Then I wished her well, not because she had earned forgiveness on demand, but because I no longer wanted hatred renting space inside the life I had rebuilt. I walked toward Rebecca's car feeling no triumph, no need to turn around, and no desire to hear one final apology. Just freedom. 2 years after I stood outside Graham's office with cold ravioli in my hand, Mike, Clara, and I attended the opening of a new workforce training center my company had renovated on the south side. Hundreds of apprentices would learn electrical work, carpentry, welding, and plumbing there. Marcus handed me oversized ceremonial scissors while employees gathered behind us. I looked at the building, at the company logo on our trucks, and at the people whose families now depended partly on decisions I made. My life was not better because Lauren's had fallen apart. It was better because when betrayal exposed the truth, I did not allow rage to choose my future. I chose evidence. I chose people who had the courage to stand beside me. And I built something larger in the space where my marriage had collapsed. If you take anything from my story, let it be these 5 lessons. 1. The dinner outside Graham's door taught me that proof is more valuable than an explosive confrontation. If I had kicked down that door, I might have become the only person led away in handcuffs while they erased the financial records. 2. Mike and Clara taught me that the right allies do not encourage reckless revenge. They help you protect evidence, act legally, and prevent more people from being harmed. 3. Lauren's offshore transfer taught me to secure my finances without stealing, hiding assets, or confusing justice with retaliation. Careful legal action protected my business far better than an empty bank account ever could. 4. Graham's confession taught me that people united by deception often turn against one another the moment consequences arrive. We did not need to invent a story about them. We only needed to give the truth somewhere safe to land. 5. The training center taught me that winning is not watching an antagonist suffer. Winning is becoming someone their betrayal can no longer control, and using the wreckage to build a life with stronger standards. Now I want to know what you would have done in that hallway. Comment 1 if you would have recorded the evidence and walked away like I did. Comment 2 if you would have opened the door and confronted them immediately, or comment 3 if you think Mike and Clara were taking too great a risk by helping me. Tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there, because I'm always amazed by how far these stories travel. If this story stayed with you, leave a like and subscribe for more stories about betrayal, consequences, and rebuilding. Take care of yourself, protect your peace, and never mistake restraint for weakness. This is a fictional story inspired by real emotional patterns, fully rewritten in Chicago to create original content. Any resemblance to real people or events is entirely coincidental.